On this week's Back of the Grid, we're going to be looking at the announcement that Ocon is leaving Alpine at the end of the season and what that's going to mean for the driver market, as well as look forward to the Canadian Grand Prix. Let's go. Hello everyone and welcome to Back of the Grid. I am still Chris. Stu is still here.
Hi, I'm still here.
As is Tom.
Hello, as is me.
Yeah, I guess we'll dive straight in. As mentioned, a rare piece of Monday news for us, which is nice. They didn't wait.
Monday or mundane?
I'll let you be the judge of that. Ocon and Alpine, in a joint statement today, announced that he's going to be leaving the team at the end of this season when his current contract expires. It was very much we have agreed together that this is what we are going to do, and in the interest of all parties, and one of those kind of statements. But obviously, this comes off the back of Monaco when Ocon had that incident with Gasly. And the rumours that he was going to get benched for Canada, which all seem to have gone away now. But
yeah, because he's been benched for next season, that's why.
Yeah, I don't. It's hard to feel like the timing of this announcement is completely coincidence. Although saying that, I have seen some journalists suggesting that this had actually been decided pre-Monaco, which maybe if that's true, it might go some way to explaining the way he chose to try and overtake his teammate. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I don't. It doesn't really surprise me, but I just want to say before we go any further with this episode, I think some of the hate that the two drivers in Monaco that gave us the only bit of action that we really got in Monaco, I think it's pretty unfair the way some of the internet has been treating them and talking.
Ocon
some of the things I've seen in comment sections on Ocon and Magnussen, these are the same people that are complaining that it was a boring race, and it's well, hang on a minute, these two gave you the only bit of action that was in the race, for one, and two, at least they were the only two drivers trying to overtake, when in the next breath everyone's complaining about there's no overtaking. So it's what, they can't win. As soon as someone tries to make an overtake, everyone criticises them, and then in the same breath they're all criticising the race for being boring, no overtaking. So you can't have both, you know what I mean? You can't have one. Give them some credit for trying.
Yeah. And also just the level of abuse that I've got, it's
ridiculous.
It's just not needed, is it, really?
No, it's almost like it just shouldn't need saying that there's just no space for that.
Just pathetic.
So yeah, it is a good point. That just, let's all be better than that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, no, it's fine. Obviously, Bruno Famin, the Alpine team principal, was just white hot with rage after the race. So maybe this is resolved that, maybe it's not. Either way, not a huge surprise. I don't think anyone expected them to have the same driver lineup next season. It was more a case of if it was one or the other or both of them that lost their seats. I think.
Yeah, probably. I mean, let's be honest, it's not the most exciting bit of Formula One news in the world ever, is it? It's certainly not the most unexpected.
Can't say that.
But yeah, I think if we're going to analyse it, then I suppose of the two drivers that are in that team, I think Gasly was maybe the one more likely to keep his seat, and Ocon slightly less. But it's kind of the worst of a bad pair.
Yeah,
I think
kind of is.
I don't think Gasly's. I think Gasly's gone past his setting the world on fire stage, being the best driver in the world kind of thing, and it's kind of who you're going to keep, who's. I don't think there's that much between them in terms of quality. They were always going to be a fiery pairing because they've never been best mates, and it's kind of the inevitable, really, isn't it? Toto Wolff is Ocon's manager, so maybe you can find him a seat at Williams or something like that.
Yeah, I think the more interesting thing is who they replace him with and where Ocon goes. Williams is an option. I don't know. Williams right now, like Williams' biggest problem at the moment is that they've got one driver scoring points and another driver not being able to pick up those points when they are on offer. Does James Vowles want to take a risk on... Undoubtedly, Ocon is a fast, talented driver. Like, he doesn't need to prove that anymore. But he's also a driver with, I would say, probably more of a reputation than he deserves because people like to take things to the nth degree. But he still played his own part in this reputation of a driver that just crosses the line and gets in scrapes, particularly with his teammate. And I feel like at the point Williams are right now, I don't know if I would want a driver like him in the team.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some good takes on it in the sense of, like, James Vowles very much wants someone who will play to the benefit of the team. That's what Williams want. That's what Williams need. And Ocon doesn't feel like that person at the minute. Like, I mean, I think maybe they're taking it a bit too far with the kind of things that they ask Sargent to do. Like, give up your car for your teammate who crashed.
Drive a Formula 1 car.
No, I'm meaning more like give up his seat for the guy who's crashed his car the other week. Like, that might be pushing things a bit too far in. For the good of the team, do this, please. But, I mean, Ocon would have never done that. Let's put it that way. Ocon would have gone, no, he crashed.
But I don't think that would. I don't think that'd ever be an option. I don't think that'd ever be an option with a driver like Ocon because it's just true. His skill set wouldn't allow it. I think the standard of Sargent is so... It's harsh to say, but I think the standard of Sargent's skill level in Formula 1 is so low that it's quite well known that he's probably he's not the best driver on the grid, is he? By a long way. He's certainly not anywhere near as good as his teammate. It's quite well documented. It's quite visible from the results that he's not the best. So therefore, he's not really in a position to argue when they say to him, we're going to take the car, your sort of good bits of your car away from you, or your car away from you, and give it to your teammate.
Yeah.
So
I think if Ocon was in a Williams that Albon was capable of scoring points in, Ocon would also be picking up points in that car.
Yeah,
for the most part.
And I guess the question Williams need to ask is, will the points he costs them through getting too feisty outweigh the points he earns for them? And given how many other drivers are in the market right now, if I were Williams, I don't think he would be top of my list.
But I think also it's a lack of respect between drivers at Alpine. I don't think it's necessarily all Ocon and all his attitude. I think some of it is definitely the rivalry between those two is so high that there's just whatever team you put those two drivers in, if they were in together, they'd be causing trouble for each other. I think if you had Ocon maybe in a seat at Williams with Albon, then there'd probably be a bit... I think the time difference might be a little bit more between them, so therefore they're less likely to be encountering each other as often on track. And therefore, because there isn't already this previous relationship of them generally just hating each other anyway, then it's possible that he wouldn't be such a bad bet for Williams, and he could possibly integrate into that team quite well. On the on the other hand, I don't think he's necessarily going to be costing them that. I think the points he would gain for them would far outweigh the points that he would cost them in this hypothetical situation where his rivalry is so strong against Albon that they're going to take points off each other. I don't think that would be the case. And I think as well, like, there'd be more respect between the drivers and more respect for the team leaders as well. Because I think a lot of this comes down to Alpine Renault over the last few years have been so up and down and have had so much turmoil within that team that there isn't really a stalwart in that team to hold them all together and to really lead them.
Yeah.
So therefore you've got this big power vacuum that probably both drivers are keen to take advantage of to their own ends to make things benefit them individually, and that's how you get this really, really fiery situation between the two drivers, because they're both after the same thing within the team. And I think a team like Williams that's got James Vowles at the top of it doing good things and is a very, very clear leader, he's not going to let that sort of behaviour fly. So I think it'd be a much more harmonious relationship for that reason between the two drivers, and therefore replacing Sargent with Ocon would be a bit of a no-brainer for me. I think I think they'd gain a lot from having a second driver who is, well, an additional driver who is, or another team member driving the car who is capable of doing what that car is capable of, because Sargent, let's face it, isn't.
We can come back to like the drive market stuff in a little bit, but it's a good point you make about the lack of stability at Alpine, because it's still ongoing. Like a few days before this announcement, they also announced that Rob White, who was the operations director, who's been at Team Enstone through all of their guises for 20 years, is also leaving. And they said it's part of their ongoing operational restructuring. But that's like within 12 months now. Laurent Rossi left as CEO, Otmar Safnauer left as team principal, Alan Permain, sporting director, left, Pat Fry, who is chief technical officer, has left. Now there's talk that Flavio Briatore is going to be rejoining the team, and it's just like revolving door of these top positions. I mean, if anything's going to make you want to leave a team, it's Flavio returning. But
I'll tell you what, do you know what I can see happening with this team, especially with what's been happening in recent weeks in terms of Andretti and the FIA and Ben Suliam sort of pointing out that he thinks Andretti should buy a team. Then it's almost like the door is opening up for Alpine to be sold to Andretti, and Andretti become the Enstone team. And you know, is it Pat Fry who's gone to Andretti as a Formula One consultant as well as
guru,
design consultant, guru, if you like. Yeah, so that Enstone connection is there.
Yeah.
So if it's not, you know, you heard it here first. It's not outside. It's not it's not a crazy thought to think that Alpine could be sold to Cadillac in the near future. Yeah, and then definitely. All Cadillac need to do is lift up all of that Enstone goodness and then ship it all over to the USA, which is totally doable. You know, it's just machinery. A lot of it. Yeah. It's heavy machinery, some of it, you know, all the CNC milling machines, all that kind of thing, that Formula One, and, you know, kilns and things like that. They could potentially like split it between the facilities they have in the States and the facilities in Enstone and become a pretty, maybe a relatively short space of time, quite a powerful Formula One team.
Yeah, I think they already have said they'd plan to, because I think Andretti have already got a base near Silverstone where they run like their Formula E and Extreme E teams out of. So they've already said like their plan A would be to just expand that to have like F1 sites, their F1 site in, I can't remember where it is in the States that they're based, but yeah, like a 2-horse team. But yeah, take over Alpine / Renault, you've got the whole facility there ready to go.
Yeah.
Very, very messy there though. In terms of who's going to replace him at Alpine, it's got to be Jack Doohan's seat, right? Like, he's been there as reserve for so long, doing so many test days. It would be disappointing if he didn't get a shot, put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like the Red Bull situation where you've got tons of junior drivers and you're taking your pick. Like, their program's much smaller and they've got one driver that's in the pipeline ready for a Formula One seat.
Yeah.
And if they don't put him in it, I'd say that it sort of discredits the junior program that they've got to some degree, because it's like, well, what was it for if he's going to sit around waiting there and then get pulled in? Not get pulled in, sorry, when the seat becomes available. So, yeah.
I think it's a strange time for like lower formula drivers, because you've got Kimi Antonelli all being absolutely hyped up as the next big thing. Everyone's really excited for him, and yet he's not appeared so far. Yes, he's had some interesting results in Formula 2, but he's definitely, I wouldn't say at this point in the season that he's set the world on fire in Formula 2. Behrman had a great run in Saudi Arabia for Ferrari, but in arguably one of the best cars on the grid, so he was always going to have a decent result, or he ought to have anyway. And yes, he did the business in a Formula One car, but in F2, he hasn't sort of again been amazing. Like they've been good. I think it's a competitive season in F2 this year anyway, so it is going to be harder for any driver to really, really shine and dominate Formula 2. And then there's so many other drivers in Formula 2 doing a really, really good job that I think you could take any of that sort of top 5 or even 10 in the championship at the moment, stick any of them in a Formula 1 car, and if it's a decent car, they're going to do all right.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, like with both Antonelli and Behrman, like F1 teams are way more interested in what they're doing in F1 tests than what they're doing in Formula 2. Like,
yeah,
both Ferrari and Mercedes have put those guys in F1 cars like as much as they can. I mean, what Behrman's doing like 4 or 5 FP1s, I think, this season. Not to mention standing in for a race, and he's done some private testing at Fiorano. Like, that's the bit they care about. And Kimi Antonelli is driving an old Mercedes F1 car like every weekend. There's not an F2 race at the moment by the sound of it.
Yeah.
I mean,
you make a good point there. Sorry, Tom, go on.
No, I was just going to say the other option you've got is one that obviously Paul's just pointed out in the chat, which is Victor Martins, because he's actually been in the Alpine Academy longer than Jack Doohan. Jack Doohan's only been there the last couple of years, because Jack Doohan used to be a Red Bull junior, I want to say, at one point, and got dropped by them and ended up in the Alpine program, whereas Victor Martins has been around it for years, since he was a teenager. So, I mean, there is the possibility of that, but at the minute, Jack Doohan's not in anything else, and Victor Martins is obviously currently running F2.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing that might stop them going for that, is that Doohan is even more available to do free practice sessions and stuff like that. I mean, obviously Victor Martins would be, but the idea is that Doohan is the reserve driver in the eventuality that one of the others is not going to race. So you'd have thought logically that's who they would go to fill the seat if they were going to go in the academy, not leapfrog Victor Martins over him. It's not beyond the realms of possibility, but like I say, if it's not one of those two drivers, then you're kind of invalidating the point of your junior program at that point. I think.
You know what? I think if they were going to get rid of Ocon right now and parachute a driver in, then they would they'd dip straight into their junior program, and that would be that. And I think that would just be a very quick solution to the problem. But I think the way this will actually, I mean, watch me be completely wrong and they announce a new driver for next season, next week, which I think actually they might have, but they might have said they were going to do, right? Like they said they're going to announce a new driver. If they don't announce a new driver in the near future, then it will be, I reckon it'll go all the way to the end of the F2 season, and it's going to be one of those where whoever does a really good job in F2 ends up with that seat, and they just disregard their junior program.
But you look at the options that are currently on the grid that are in need of a seat, like Carlos Sainz, potentially Kevin Magnussen, Zhou Guanyu, Valtteri Bottas, potentially Ricciardo and Tsunoda. Like, neither of them have been confirmed yet. Logan Sargent is on the market as well. Like, that's a pretty hefty set of current experienced F1 drivers you can choose from. Yeah.
I think it's hard for Sainz. It's another option, I suppose, that opens up for Sainz, isn't it? But
yeah, we can get into that, because that's like quite interesting. Because another thing that is looking more and more likely, and I think a lot of people think is going to be announced in the next week or two, is that Perez is going to get another 1-year extension at Red Bull, which we've talked about before. I don't think any of us are particularly enamoured by that as a driver choice, but that was obviously one of the seats that Sainz was very much holding out for, and it looks like that door's going to be closing now. Antonelli, it seems, is going to be getting that Mercedes seat based on what people know of the testing he's doing and where Mercedes are sitting with that. So Sainz kind of starting to run out of options now.
Behrman into the Haas as well.
Yeah, Behrman into the Haas, I still think that's near guaranteed at this point. Still potentially a second Haas seat available, because I don't know if they're going to want to keep Magnussen, which actually is, Haas have gone from being like a bit of a joke back of the pack team to actually a pretty attractive prospect now. Like, they really seem to be going in the right direction.
An interesting option, I would call them.
I think for a lot of drivers, they offer a good stopgap option, like a keep me in the sport and wait for a better seat to to open up kind of thing. I mean, Sainz, obviously we know Sainz has been talking to Sauber/Audi, and from what people have said, they want him. Sainz apparently as well has been talking to Williams, which I find very interesting.
Sainz to Williams is an interesting one. I think again he brings a lot to the table. He's a race winner. Is Albon's won a race, hasn't he?
No.
Has he not?
No, Lewis Hamilton.
Lewis Hamilton
stops after
a
couple of occasions.
Yeah. Race winner to. I think Williams is kind of an interesting project because they do seem to be sort of steadily moving in the right direction. I think James Vowles is doing a good job there. So if you're Carlos Sainz, like if you can't get that Red Bull seat, which I think I prefer a Max Verstappen and Carlos Sainz combo. I think Sainz is, in my mind, Sainz would be faster than Perez in that car, and I think Red Bull, given that they're probably not, I don't see them winning the Constructors' Championship this year if things keep going the way they are for them, then they can't seriously be not looking at Sainz as an option.
Annoyingly, their dads seem to be the problem. Like when they were teammates at Toro Rosso, like I think Sainz and Verstappen were like fine together, but behind the scenes, both their dads were just like causing havoc all the time and just like disagreeing about things and probably thinking their son like should be getting the parts first and all that kind of stuff. Like I don't know, like if I were Red Bull, you'd just want to be like, we'll sign you and both of your dads can just sod off. Like, yeah.
to be honest,
like, we're not here to babysit your dads. We're here to have two good Formula One drivers and win races.
I wouldn't be surprised if both the drivers were actually up for that contract signing.
Probably.
I mean, to be fair, I don't know how much Carlos Sainz Senior actually kind of meddles, let's say, in what Carlos Sainz Junior is doing, but I can imagine that there's times when Max just wishes Joss would just not come to races and just go somewhere else.
Yeah. Sainz. I also feel like Sainz' hesitation to sign with Sauber Audi is like maybe a little bit telling. Like on paper, that should be a no-brainer to like get in at the ground floor on a new works team who have won basically every other motorsport they've ever entered.
I mean, hang on a minute. Ground floor. I mean, we're lower than the ground floor at Sauber at the minute. They're the only team without points.
Well, from an Audi point of view, they're not, because they've actually gone in sooner than they originally planned to, and they are like working on their own stuff behind. Like, I don't think Audi care what Sauber do this year and next year. Like, they are just getting everything ready for 2026.
Yeah, I guess, but it's just that it must be difficult to look at that team in it with its current performance, and I think part of it is maybe driver related. I think if they didn't have Zhou, I think they might have scored points by now, because I don't think Zhou's been amazing. He was abysmal in Monaco, absolutely, and that car, the car was in general super slow. Yeah, the car was terrible in Monaco too. But I think if you're Sainz and you're looking at that team right now, you're looking at a year or two of real pain. You're going from like a front running car to suffering quite badly.
Yeah.
So that must be off-putting. But then all of the options for him at the minute are, sadly, it's just the way it's turned out. Maybe Alpine might turn into a reasonable option for Sainz. He's got the world at his feet. Kind of, he's going from a race. He's got one race win so far this season. He's in a really, really good car. Can he turn it into a decent contract? How is he going? Is he going to find like the best possible team that he can? My light just went off and then on again.
Yeah,
it's going off and on again. What the heck?
A ghost has entered the podcast.
I'll just turn it off. That was weird. So I was talking about Sainz. So yeah, I think he just has to. I think he's almost got to be able to predict the future and see what Audi are going to do.
Yeah.
If I was Sainz, I probably would go for the Audi just because on paper that looks like it should turn into a decent operation. It's just then down to him to perform at a high enough level in order to stay with that for that team to want to keep him. Because whatever happens this next couple of seasons with Sauber is effectively assessing drivers for what Audi are going to do in the future and whether they're going to keep their lineup or whether they're just going to bring in a whole new setup for when Audi do eventually actually join Formula One, which I feel like we've been talking about for like 3 years already.
I know. When they like rolled out that show car with an Audi livery on it, that felt like so long ago now.
Yeah. Not a great livery.
Because it was.
No, really poor.
It was a long time ago. That's why it feels like a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's about where we're at with like drive market rumour stuff at the moment. It feels like everyone's just waiting for someone else to blink, doesn't it? Like nobody wants to show their hand too soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The house of cards will fall eventually. It's just once that first piece goes, then everyone's just gonna suddenly move, and we'll have like a few days of just absolute silly season carnage.
Yeah, well, like
and it'll all just sell down.
When you look at like what's officially signed and is a done deal and what's not, there's like, I think it's something like still 10 seats, like literally half the grid could still technically change because
it is. Well,
there's only about 10 that are like, I mean, yes, some are practically done, but
I'd say, and technically it's 11 because technically Stroll hasn't got a seat next year, but
I was counting Stroll in that. Maybe I've miscounted.
Yeah, I think
But
3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 11 including Stroll.
Okay.
Which is a wild number of seats still available at this point in the season.
So
anyway, shall we have a little look ahead to Canada?
Yeah, why not?
Which I'm excited about. I love this track so much.
Yeah,
it's a good circuit, isn't it? It's high speed, not necessarily high speed corners everywhere, but they do get up to. There's some good long straights. They get to very fast. The wall of champions is always a factor, and something that just every year gets way more attention, I think, than what it actually deserves.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, when was the last time a champion crashed into the wall of champions?
It's been a long time, I think.
Verstappen's flirted with it once or twice since becoming a champion, hasn't he? I don't think he's actually hit it, though.
I don't think Hamilton's ever been in it. I don't remember Vettel hitting it. It's been a long old time. It might be like Button was the last one to do it.
Button's hit it, yeah.
I'll give you one storyline straight off the bat, which excites me. The whole weekend looking like 30, 40, 50% chance of rain. In fact, Sunday possibly even up to 60% chance of rain, which is always good at this track.
Yeah.
Means you get the little boats out, the little paper boats and stuff.
We don't want that much rain.
Yeah.
We want enough rain to have some fun racing, but not so much rain that
at the moment, the slightest hint of rain, it's a red flag and no one's running. So let's. To be honest, I would much as fun as rain is. Maybe like a bit of a wet qualifying to jumble up the grid, and then we'll have like just a normal race. Is it a sprint weekend or is it a regular weekend this week?
Pretty sure it's just a regular weekend. Thank goodness.
Oh, thank goodness for that. I like regular weekends.
As a tangent, did either of you see any of the Nürburgring 24-hour at the weekend just gone?
No, because the fog was so thick, the cameras couldn't see any of it.
Yeah, it didn't have been the Nürburgring like 7.5 hours. Well, I think they have to do at least 8 hours for the result to count. So they did a few extra laps behind the safety car to top it up to 8 hours. I saw a video from like a team in the middle of the pit lane and like looking at either direction, like there wasn't even a hint of the end of the pit lane. It was ridiculous.
It's very really Spa-esque, that, isn't it? Let's just go do some laps around the safety car to make this count.
It's a big old circuit. I was gutted to see Steve Alvarez Brown or Super GT, the guy who does Gran Turismo racing, sim racing online, but it is mostly Gran Turismo these days. He basically effectively missed a yellow flag or missed a slow zone, a 60 zone, and he was doing like 140 kilometers through a 60 zone. So he just missed it, and they just don't have it at Nürburgring. These sort of semi-professional, it's not quite, I mean there are professional drivers in these races, but I think it's a mixture of sort of semi-professional drivers and other drivers, then like those kind of transgressions just they don't go down well at all.
No, so it's a shame because they qualified top of their category as well.
Yeah, they finished P2 in the end. It was until he got disqualified. It was a four-car team, and 3 of the 4 were sim racers, and the 4th was a professional driver. So yes, I mean, super cool to see them there and doing so much. But like gutting about that disqualification.
4-driver team.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, so 4 drivers in the car. One of them was a full-time pro driver.
Yeah. You said 4-car team. That's also.
Oh yeah, no, 4-driver car.
Yeah, 4-driver car. Yeah.
But I mean, the reason that I took it so seriously is because it's such a big track. They don't have safety cars. They have slow zones. So there are marshals and vehicles on the track, and you have to respect them. So because it's the only racetrack in the world that you have to have a license specifically for that racetrack. So when you do discretion like that, they're like, we'll just have that back off you and you can try again next year. Crazy. Anyway, should we go back to Canada?
Yeah. Yes. Oh, sorry, Canada. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll kind of base storylines around a question from the inbox, which is, I guess, the biggest story this weekend, which is from Benson, who says, "Hey man, do you think we'll see a return to form for Red Bull in Montreal, or is a street circuit with notoriously savage curbs another circuit where they could struggle and let McLaren and Ferrari close the gap even further?"
Yes.
Yeah, I think McLaren and Ferrari have got close enough to them that the compromise that Red Bull have to make for riding the curbs at circuits like this will put them right in the clutches of the other two. I don't think it'll be as bad as what we saw in Monaco in terms of how much they'll struggle in comparison. It'll be a lot fairer a fight, but I would not be surprised to see like a mixed front row where Verstappen isn't on pole. Just because of how much you've got to hustle the curbs to get a good lap.
Yeah. I think Verstappen is obviously capable of getting that bit extra out of the car every single race weekend, and I think he'll still have a reasonable run and a decent result. I think the win will be much more difficult for him than it has been in previous sort of at the very beginning of the season, say. I think that there will be a whole host of cars between wherever Verstappen ends up. There's going to be a whole bunch of cars between him and Perez, as has become a theme these last few races, which is obviously costing Red Bull an awful lot of points. I can definitely see McLarens and Ferraris and maybe even Mercedes. I don't think Mercedes is going to be in the mix for a win, but I think it does. I think a circuit like this does give Mercedes a sort of more closed setup window that they can take advantage of, because their car doesn't do everything great. This car's kind of like there's not really many high speed corners on this circuit, is there? They're all kind of medium speed to low speed corners. So I think that the Mercedes should be able to use that to its advantage and maybe get into the mix for the front row of the grid. I don't think they'll be getting pole, but I think they'll be mixing it with the sort of top teams, possibly, if they can find a window for their car.
Yeah, I feel like the last couple of weekends, like Mercedes have spent practice sort of looking like they might be there, and then come qualifying, like it seems to fall away. So they're getting there, but it's like it's really frustrating that it always seems to fall apart at the pointy end.
Yeah, they're dropping off less though. Russell qualified fourth, I think, for Monaco.
Fourth or fifth, yeah.
Fourth, yeah. It was fifth, and then Verstappen sixth, Hamilton seventh, wasn't it? So third row, like ahead of a Red Bull. If imagine saying that a Mercedes would qualify ahead of a Red Bull a year ago, it's just beggars belief. You just never believe it, would you? So the fact that Red Bull are struggling at the moment with some of these circuits, and Mercedes seem to be getting to grips with their car, maybe they won't be fighting for the front row, but they will be fighting. I think they're possibly going to be fighting Red Bull for whatever position they end up with.
If these Red Bull struggles continue, it's entirely possible. Because I do think we're looking at a McLaren versus Ferrari weekend.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. But I don't think Red Bull will be completely out of the fight. I think they'll be there, but I also think Max Verstappen is going to be fighting against both McLarens and both Ferraris on his own. And I struggle, however good he is, I struggle to see how he can win that fight, especially at a track that's not going to suit the car in the first place.
I think that's part of the problem for them at the minute, isn't it? Like, the other two teams have got both cars up and around that pointy end, whereas Perez is barely getting out of Q1 and Q2 most weekends at the minute. So
no real gunner.
Yeah, I think if he doesn't get himself into Q3 to at least be in the mix, it's going to cause Max problems, because he's essentially fighting those 4 cars on his own for the rest of the weekend.
And it has ramifications for the championship, you know, because if Leclerc has another banger of a race and wins, and you've got Verstappen down in maybe 5th or maybe even lower than that, maybe 6th or 7th, then that's a whole bunch of points that you're losing to your championship rival, to who is becoming his championship rival, both Norris and Leclerc. So yeah, I think it's all to play for this weekend. I'm excited to see how qualifying turns out. I'm very excited to see how the race turns out, because I think that Ferrari and McLaren are so close to each other now, and I think tyre wear is definitely going to be, it is a thing between those two cars. You know, like they're right on a knife edge. I think the McLaren's just got the edge in terms of tyre wear, so it's going to be a fascinating race, this one, I think.
And then of course throw a bit of rain into the mix as well. Like, last year, top 3 in qualifying was Verstappen, Hulkenberg, Alonso. And Alonso and Hamilton were both on the podium. So, yeah. So that being said, should we do some predictions?
We can try.
Why not? Who wants to go first for fastest in Q3?
I think you should, because you... Oh, okay.
Me?
Right. Oh, I've done it. Go on then, Tom. What were you going to do? Leclerc?
I don't know. Chris was putting me on the spot, I think. I'm gonna... I was debating going for one of the Ferraris. I just didn't know which. And I was sort of looking back and thinking Sainz has generally gone all right here. So I was going to put my eggs in my Sainz basket and say Carlos Sainz for pole. Well, for fastest in Q3.
Okay, I'm going to go Leclerc.
Were you going to go Leclerc before I said that?
Yeah, I was.
He did say it.
He's on the back of a win in Monaco, and he'll be riding high. So I think his confidence will be high, and that will help him at this circuit. And he's got the car for it.
I agree entirely. I was also thinking Leclerc.
Okay. What about a win then? Do either of you see Chuck Leclerc turning that into a stop? I can't even say
I'm going to hedge my bets and go for I'm going to go Piastri win. I think he's going to do it this race.
Interesting.
Because I think the tyre wear on the McLaren is that bit better. It just looks after its tyres that bit better, and it gives them more options for strategy. So, and there's usually safety cars at this circuit, so it's going to put McLaren in an advantageous position. So therefore, I think it's a McLaren win.
In a weird way, we've done the same thing, but differently, because I'm going to say Norris.
You Norris? Ooh, I like it. This is fun.
Sainz v Norris for a win. I think ding-dong battle all the way through, just back and forth. And then Norris maybe eking it out in the end for similar reasons you're saying, that the McLaren seems to be a bit better on its tyres. Chris?
I copied Stu on fastest in Q3, so I'll copy you, Tom. For win, I'm also going to go Norris, which probably guarantees I'm going to be wrong on both counts now.
Oh, so. Brilliant. Thanks for that.
Oh, well.
Seems like you've copied us on 2, you can go first on the next 2. So what about first DNF?
First DNF is going to be... I'm almost tempted to say Perez.
I mean, it worked for me last time, almost.
Yeah. Ocon's another obvious choice given recent events. No, I'm going to go for Ricciardo.
Okay. I am going to go with tried and tested logic here, and I'm going to say Lance Stroll.
Damn, I was
Canadian,
that.
The Canadian in Canada.
The Canadian in Canada. No, I can't do that now. Then I've got to go. It's not going to be Joe. It's definitely not going to be Magnussen. He'll be keeping his nose clean. Hulkenberg won't be. Ocon.
I mean, you're saying Magnussen will be keeping his nose clean, and what happened in Monaco, man? Come on. Think about what you're saying.
He's had so much online hate this week. He's just going to be keeping his head down. It's a tough one. I think this race, there's definitely going to be someone. There's definitely going to be a safety car, I think. So it's who's going to crash. I don't think it's Ricciardo. I don't think it's Tsunoda.
You've named everyone who's not going to be so far. Are you going with Bottas?
Yeah.
Okay. And Chris, like I said, because you copied us twice between us, you're going to go first again on the number of finishes, I think.
I'll just get in an old faithful 17 then.
Okay. I'm going to go slightly more optimistic and go 18.
I'm going to go 19 then.
Ooh. Just the one Bottas DNF incident.
Yeah.
What's our random driver, or who is our random driver, should I say, this week?
A random driver is a name that we haven't said yet, which is Max Verstappen.
One
of the rare times we get this deep in and none of us have said his name.
And it's one of those times where you can either hedge your bets and like just say first, so that if you lose points everywhere else, you've maybe picked that one up, or you can try and place him somewhere in this finishing grid.
You know what this proves? Formula 1 in 2024 is good again.
It's
because
back.
we can't predict where he's going to be. We literally can't. I cannot predict this weekend where Max Verstappen is going to be.
Do you know how many 5 out of 5s are going to get when someone goes fastest Max, win Max, random driver first? You know we're going to get tons of them.
I'm going to go 5th.
Ooh.
I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I've said this whole time. I think he's 5th this week.
I was going to go 3rd, so I'll put that out there. Kilowog's loving life, because that's twice we've predicted exactly the same thing. As I'm saying things in chat, Kilowog's literally hitting enter on them.
I'll have him 2nd, I think.
2nd.
Wow, I feel like I've gone a bit.
I've gone
a bit too heavy. No, I've gone a bit too heavy on the Red Bull struggles, haven't I? Here, I think maybe it's. Can I change it to 4th? Can I just change it to 4th?
You can change it to 4th because they're not locked in yet. But now they're locked in. Now they're locked in. Now they're locked in. Right, so if you want to get involved in this, as I mentioned, you can win a prize if you get 5 out of 5, which this weekend could potentially be quite likely. So head to backofthegrid.com if you want to get involved. All the information's there, and there's also information on how to get involved with our fantasy leagues and all that kind of stuff that we do. So head over there and check it all out. And we'll do a very quick stop into Inbox for a bit of a different one this week.
Oh my god.
Keep it saying now. Stay out. Box. Hey man.
That's a long old bit of
I'm going to let you
there.
read this one, Tom, because it's a long one. I think you've already pre-read it.
I've definitely skim-read it before. So Matthew Fernau sent us a message a few weeks ago now to do with just basically a sprint qualifying idea, and essentially wanted our opinion on it because apparently Matthew values our opinion on these kind of things. So I'll quickly run through it. I said we'd keep it for like an episode like this where we've not got much else, and we could definitely fit it in and give it some justice. So here we go. Right. New format for a sprint qualifying weekend would be a Friday with an FP1 and then the actual sprint, a Saturday with an FP2 and then the actual Grand Prix qualifying, and then Sunday would be just the standard race as normal. The sprint session does qualifying and the race kind of all at once. So it's an hour long. The first, essentially, 10-15 minutes is kind of like almost like a one-shot qualifying, and at the end of at the end of all that 10-15 minute period, whatever it ends up being, the safety car essentially comes round, gathers everyone up, and you form in the order that you've qualified in.
So it's like when you go karting.
Yeah, very similar to that. Yeah, I think that maybe that's where this idea comes from, to be fair. So the safety car comes, gathers everyone up after this 10-15 minute qualifying session, and everyone gets kind of moved into their grid order. You could maybe go into the pit lane, I guess, to do it, and kind of like we would in a red flag situation. And then we essentially do a rolling start from there, or maybe a grid start, depending on how everyone sees fit. And then that would just be it, just a kind of an hour. It's in there. It's a bit mixed up. It's a bit like quick one shot, kind of makes it maybe a little bit more down to who's there in that one moment. and then from there, you can't obviously like pit during the qualifying session. And if you do pit during that qualifying session, you have to then start at the back. Like, just essentially, like, yeah, make it all just like a one-shot short session.
The tyre element is really interesting. So he basically says, like, the tyres you qualify on are the tyres that you also race on. So do you stick on a set of softs, get yourself at the front, and then have to manage them, or maybe have to make a pit stop? Do you qualify further back on harder tyres that you can take to the end? I quite like that. Like it is definitely coming from someone going karting. It is an interesting format. I still personally would like to see one-shot qualifying for sprints. I think that would be a far more entertaining and different way of doing it.
I think this idea from Matthew is kind of getting close to that, isn't it? Like, only having a 10-15 minute session, realistically you're not going to get that many laps in at full pace.
Well, the problem is, if you say to them you can only qualify on one set of tyres and you have to race them, if you had a 15-minute qualifying session, everybody would just stay in the pits until the last 3 minutes and then go out and do one lap.
You'd have to force them out in groups.
Yeah. Which is why I would rather you just go the whole hog and say one-shot qualifying, you get a lap each.
Yeah. I mean, why not?
Do you know what else you could do?
Just
get rid of sprint races altogether.
There is that too.
It's just got to be...
I genuinely thought at that point you were going to say you could just do reverse grid order.
Well, all that, yeah.
Reverse championship order, sorry.
Reverse championship grid order. But I think that's the best possible sprint race you can have. The best races, historically, the best races that we've seen have always been from mixed up grids. Yeah. They're always really action-packed. So why not just put the fastest car at the back and the slowest car at the front, and see how much time the fastest car can make up against the slower cars ahead of it over the course of, a sprint race distance, however long
20
that
laps
distance happens to be. Well, it's a kilometres distance.
Yeah, but for all intents and purposes, let's say 20 laps.
Yeah.
Over half an hour, over a period of a half hour or 40-minute race. Yeah.
So it just has to be something different, basically.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, like bringing my issue with this, I only have one real issue with this, and it's that I always had a problem with them having a practice session after a sprint race. That they couldn't change the car. I mean, do we kind of still have? No, we don't have that anymore, do we? It's
I think that is.
It's practice one, sprint qualifying, sprint race, real qualifying, Grand Prix.
Yeah, and I like that. Like, that's a much better version of this format than they had the last year or two, but it's still meh.
What you would potentially do then, in order to try and tweak that a little bit but stay true to Matthew's idea here, is you would have Friday where you've got FP1 and FP2, then on the Saturday you would do this like sprint into sprint race hour, then later on in the day you would come back and do regular qualifying for the Grand Prix.
No,
right?
I would do practice FP1 on a Friday. Out. God, everyone's whacking their mics today.
I know, so excited. We just love talking about sprints.
So FP1 on a Friday, then reverse championship order sprint race on a Friday afternoon, then Saturday. Oh wait, no, because there's
exactly. That's what I was getting at. So just
I want meaningful running. The whole idea is
meaningful
to have
running on the Friday.
Meaningful running on every day. Yeah. So. Maybe we open with a reverse championship sprint race and it's just race what you brought. And then we have the 2 practice sessions, then qualifying, then race.
You've got to use the same setup you finished the last race with, so good luck in Monaco.
That would be great, to be fair.
Or maybe
there's like a lottery, right? And every team principal draws out a different team, like from a pool of balls or whatever, like when they do the World Cup. So like, I don't know, I'm Christian Horner and I draw out Haas, and then I just get to pick all the setup for the Haas, and then
or you get to pick where they are on the grid.
You just random lottery at the grid.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't like it. Move on. We need to move on. Just get rid of sprint races altogether.
Alrighty, that is us done for this week. So we'll be back next week to review what hopefully will be an exciting Canadian Grand Prix, because it usually is. In the meantime, as ever, if you want to get involved with the Predictions League, that is back of the grid there. backofthegrid.com, and you can also contact us from there. You can find us on all the social media things. We are all just Back of the Grid everywhere, so please do that. If you want to get involved with our lovely little Discord community, you can go to patreon.com/backofthegrid to find out how to do that. And I think that's it. So thanks as ever for joining us, and until next week, goodbye.
Yeah,
bye,
goodbye.
everyone.
Don't forget to leave a comment and
Likes.
give us some grief.
Like
debate.
subscribe.
I will fight you all in the comments
Bells.
about the controversial things that I said today.
click the bells if you want to argue with Stu when this releases.
Yeah.
Tell us how wrong we are.
Bye.
Bye.